Why is everyone stabbing me in the back?
'Cause it's easy, and it does a lot of damage.
On the night of the Black Knives, Ranni was able to escape the clutches of her two fingers by orchestrating the death of Godwin's soul and killing her own body at the same time. But if Ranni just wanted to perform that ritual, she could have stopped after killing Godwin the Golden. Instead,
the demigods began to fall, starting with Godwin the Golden.
So I think Ranni had another objective for the Night of the Black Knives. Since you don't mend the Elden Ring in the Age of Stars ending, I think that it had to be shattered beforehand. After all, the Elden Ring was
that which commanded the stars.
And with no other way to shatter the Elden Ring, I think Ranni wanted to push Marika past her breaking point. Now, I got this idea by looking into one of Ranni's co-conspirators, Alecto, the ringleader of the Black Knife Assassins. Although Tyche's mom is mentioned in only one item description, the name Alecto is also a genius allusion to Greek and Roman mythology, so we can uncover all kinds of parallels that can help us decipher the game's lore. Alecto, along with her sisters Miquella and Tisiphone, was one of the three Aeneid or Furies, not to be confused with the Furies.
I want Blythe to breed me.
The Aeneid punished impiety, oathbreakers, and murder, especially the killing of a close family member. Although Godwin hasn't been accused of anything in the base game, it's quite possible that could change in the DLC. The Aeneid lived underground and was said to be born of the goddess Nyx, or Night. The Romans knew that goddess as Nox. And in the game,
they say the assassins who carried out the deed were scions of the Eternal City,
which were built underground by the Nox. What's more, Alecto and her sisters were frequently depicted with snakes, so the scales in the Black Knife armor could be a subtle nod to that. Most of all, the Furies specialized in driving their targets mad, and as Ranni tells us,
Queen Marika was driven to the brink.
This parallel is even clearer in the original Japanese, which can be translated as Queen Marika must have gone mad. Now, I think it's very significant that Miyazaki and Morton specifically chose Alecto as the name of the ringleader of the Black Knife Assassins, as opposed to one of her sisters. To see why, let's skip a few centuries and turn to Alecto's first appearance in Latin literature, the Aeneid by Virgil. Juno wants to stop the Trojan Aeneas from marrying. That would prevent the founding of the Roman Empire. To that end, Juno calls upon Alecto to provoke a war between the Latins and the Trojans. Juno singles out Alecto because the latter delights in sowing discord and inciting war. There's already quite the parallel here to Elden Ring. Like her Greek counterpart Hera, Juno was the Queen of Heaven. Meanwhile, the name Ranni means queen in quite a few languages, including Hindi, not to mention that she's deeply linked with the moon and stars, aka the heavens. Then we have Juno's famous line from the Aeneid, "If I cannot sway the heavens, then I shall rouse the power of hell." And in the game, Ranni is cut off from her fate, so she needs to call upon the Black Knife Assassins. In the Aeneid, Alecto's victims hadn't done anything wrong. Instead, she chose her victims based on how she could frenzy them and trigger conflict. In other words, while the Greek Aeneid punished violence, Alecto in the Aeneid provoked violence. And to really hammer this point home, when Juno first summons Alecto, she calls her Luctificam, which can be translated as the bringer of sorrow. Now, let's get back to Elden Ring. If you talk to Gideon after defeating Melania, he has this to say.
I heard speculation Miquella embedded himself in the hair-lit tree. But before he could finish, someone cut the tree open and absconded with his infant form. Perhaps the Queen's sorrow was justified.
This heavily implies that Marika was indeed motivated by grief to shatter the Elden Ring, but only after Miquella was kidnapped by Mohg. With all of this in mind, the Night of the Black Knives would have been a half success for Ranni. She did free herself from her body, but she failed to fully push Marika to the brink. This leads me to the wildest theory of the video, so unhinged speculation ahead. In a bid to finally get Marika to shatter the Elden Ring, I think the Black Knives, Ranni, and Rykard collaborated with Mohg. With the Elden Ring shattered, Ranni would get her chance to bring about the Age of Stars, Rykard could declare war on the Erd Tree, and Mohg would get a waifu. Everyone wins. Among the demigods, Miquella may have been the biggest rival to Ranni's Age of Stars. In a way, Miquella represents everything about the life Ranni renounced. Not unlike Goldmask, Miquella saw Golden Order fundamentalism as flawed, but thought he could perfect it with his unalloyed gold. And in cut content, it was heavily implied that Miquella was seen as the official successor to Queen Marika. This is still hinted at in the base game, since you can find Radagon's triple rings of light and Marika's source seal in Elphael. On the other finger, Ranni wants to take her order with her into the stars and
rid the world of what came before.
Let's also not forget the giant merman in the room. Miquella was deeply devoted to Godwyn. As we learned from Castle Sol and the Golden Epitaph, Miquella desperately sought a way to give Godwyn a proper death, or to revive him. But if Miquella succeeded, it's quite possible Godwyn's resurrection could have undermined or impacted Ranni in a major way. And at the very least, if Miquella learned the truth about Ranni's involvement in killing his brother, I can't imagine he would take it that well. As for the other members of this conspiracy, thanks to the Blasphemous Claw, we do know that Ranni and Rykard were in cahoots for the Night of the Black Knives. Since those two were fine with mass murder, I don't think either would blanch at a bit of literal kidnapping. And there also seem to be quite a few links between Rykard and Mohg. Both Rykard's recusants and Mohg's bloody fingers use severed fingers to hunt the tarnished. You can also find the dagger talisman in the Volcano Manor, which depicts a white masked surgeon, just like Vare. Plus, we know that the surgeons were abducted, perhaps using the abductor virgins associated with Rykard. What's more, all three players in this potential conspiracy may have left traces in the consecrated snowfield, en route to the Halictree. Mohg has his knights and a waygate to his Neverland ranch, but one of Rykard's recusants also invades you in the frigid outskirts. And this theory could also explain why we find so many Black Knife assassins in the Ordina Everjail. Ranni sent them to track down Miquella and his Halictree, but they were captured. We also find the Black Knife armor outside the Everjail, so I think there was a skirmish before they were taken, but again, that is speculation. Speaking of Everjails, when we find Alecto, she's imprisoned at the Moonlight Altar, so this raises the question, did Ranni betray the Black Knives? To start, I don't think the Black Knives knew what Ranni was actually up to. During her questline, Ranni says,
I stole the rune of death, slew mine own Empyrean flesh, casting it away.
This heavily implies that Ranni herself called the curse mark into her own back. If that's the case, Ranni wouldn't have had to let the Black Knives in on the full details of her plans, which would have made it much easier for Ranni to turn on them. We also learned from Tyche's ashes that the Black Knives were fleeing the royal capital after killing Godwyn. Even though she's the ringleader, Alecto isn't in the custody of the Golden Order. If she had been captured by those forces, I really can't imagine they would have given up such a prized captive. Instead, I think it makes the most sense that Alecto was captured by the Cardians, but only by someone with access to the Moonlight Altar. So who could that be? The altar is sealed off by a Cardian sigil, which can only be opened with Ranni's ring, and once topside you can find Ranni's Dark Moon. We also know that Blythe and EG can fend off multiple Black Knife assassins, so they could probably take on Alecto, and EG can seal Everjails. As for why Ranni would want to capture Alecto, it's possible she may have wanted to keep Alecto alive as leverage over the other Black Knives, or to hide the evidence of her main collaborator. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really interested to see what yins think, so let me know down below. If you like this type of content, you can also support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships.